Um, so welcome. I'm going to talk today about our FY21 budget that I have recommended to the school committee, and they are perusing it, analyzing it, and meeting with different department leaders about it, and we'll be making their decision over the next few weeks. We wanted very much to inform the public about it and discuss it with them. So thank you so much. My name is Arthur Yanofsky. I'm the superintendent, and I work up until now really closely with what we call our administrative council, which is the principals and department leaders upstairs, head of special ed, person in charge of curriculum, the finance and operations director, to come up with this budget. I'll talk a little bit about the process we went through to come up with it, and a lot about the specific aspects of it. We will focus a lot, you'll see, on very small percentage of it, because in a school budget, so much of it is already called for in terms of contractual obligations, in terms of the fact that we have staff that make up a huge percentage of it, that they're actually on the margins of flexibility is very small, but very important all the same, and very important for the town to understand the kind of initiatives we're asking to be able to take on behalf of the children. We want to combine in this process really thoughtful and careful fiscal thinking and within the constraints of the town, while offering the best education for our children that's possible. So those two things are in our head all the time. So I put on this picture a picture of someone on the rail trail, because I think the rail trail is a good metaphor for the work we're doing, is that we want to create something that's sustainable, that we have an innovative and thoughtful teaching staff and leadership staff. We want to create something that the town and the schools and the youth and different generations really believe in. Just like the rail trail, that people really see the benefits of it. The rail trail, to its credit, is something very, very tangible that a lot of people can participate in. Schools sometimes, because they affect one particular part of our population, are sometimes can feel a little mysterious, and I hope to sort of illuminate those things so that we all can share in what is a really good, outstanding school system, and as a result of the support that the town gives it. So, let me begin. So, let me start with the process. We believe that we need to, in order to work within a town that both expects excellence but also expects us to operate within some fiscal constraints, we need to plan long term. That we need to identify the most important things for us to do. So the way that we do that is through a lot of careful deliberation, using data to inform those decisions, and then trying to find efficiencies where we can. So the process began this past year in May. We went, as this administrative council went off-site, and we identified for the next 3 years what are our absolute priorities. What are the things that we feel our students have to have in order for us to continue to have an excellent school system? And you'll see what those things are in just a minute. But we narrowed down what are the absolute most important things. They fall into two buckets, which you'll see. One is about elevating achievement, and one is about deepening social emotional learning, because we feel like that's what our kids need the most. Then we spent the next few months identifying those practices, those strategies that would enable us to fulfill those needs. We met again over the summer, worked through what are the highest leverage strategies, the ones that have borne the greatest fruit for our students over the past few years. And we narrowed in on what are the things that we really want to focus in on. So we had these needs, then we figured out how do we get to those needs, what are the best strategies to do it. And then we spent the next few months in the fall really, of those high leverage strategies, what are the most important that we need to support? What are the 3 or 4 things that we can do within our fiscal constraints that will really have a difference? Then we thought, if these are the true priorities, are there things in our budget that we could do without, that we could take money from to allocate to these things? Keep in mind that we've been doing this for a while, that in fact our non-personnel supplies and materials that we have for the schools has not increased in the last 10 years, despite the fact that the cost of software, the kinds of things that we're doing to provide a 21st century education to kids has gone up significantly. So we've been pulling from supplies and materials to make the software budget work for years. That's just an example. But we continue to look for those opportunities to reallocate. And then when we're done with this reallocation exercise, we essentially present on December 9th the result of that work to the school committee for their deliberation. So let me go back to now, as we've narrowed our focus over the last couple of years into two main buckets. One, that if we really want to engage every student every day, that's our challenge, that there is no student in a classroom that shouldn't have an engaging, enriching experience. That in order to do that, in this climate, in this year 2020, we need to focus on two things in particular. Creating programming that enables them to individualize their experience enough so that they can elevate their academic achievement, and providing the skills they need to navigate the current social emotional climate for young people, which has its challenges nowadays that they weren't there 20 years ago. So let's focus on that social emotional sort of space first. In our children today, whether it's because of social media, whether it's because of the way that scheduling is done for parents and children, whether it's because of political discourse, whether it's because of a variety of forces, we are seeing higher and higher rates of dysregulation in our younger and younger kids. Kids that are struggling to sit still in the way that they used to be able to do and attend and really achieve. Cognitively, they're just as strong or stronger. It's harder for children, the typical child, to navigate the classroom than it was 20 years ago. And as a result, we need to provide instruction for them to be able to do that effectively. And that instruction takes a variety of forms that I'll describe in just a minute. But it's important that we invest early in their social emotional wherewithal so that they have the resilience to tackle really challenging academic work so that we see the kind of results that we expect of our children. In partnership with the town, the school committee, the schools have taken on a number of efforts that show our putting this as a priority. We changed the school start times this year, which was an effort to sort of start with the most basic things to give our kids a healthy experience, which was their sleep. Lining up how their sleep patterns that are natural and biological with the start of the time, moving high school and middle school later, moving elementary schools earlier. It makes perfect sense, but actually doing it, as I'm sure Jeannie can concur, is more complicated than one would think. It involves sort of fitting in the rich, wonderful after-school experiences that kids have and take advantage of at the high school and middle school level. It requires making transportation work and trying to do it within a fiscally responsible way. A lot of districts have gone about this by adding a lot of bus service, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on buses. Weston, for example, spent a significant amount more money on buses when they changed their start time. We have not. And in order to make that happen, it's taken a lot of work on the behalf of central office staff, administrators, and teachers to make that work. And they have been very good about doing that. And I think that the program has, the change in start times has had a really positive effect. We are working with, we've seen increased levels of anxiety, as I've told you, among younger and younger students, and we've developed a partnership with McLean that has allowed us to provide training, really excellent training to our teachers in how to do things for students using, we've gotten grants from, for example, we got a grant from the Wayland Public Schools Foundation, put what are called sensory pathways in the elementary schools, where they can, when a student is having challenges, they can go do certain kinds of exercises that allow them to sort of regather themselves, return to classrooms fairly quickly, and engage more deeply in the study. McLean has given us a lot of guidance in the implementation of that. We are also working with our elementary folks and our middle and high school folks to develop a coherent process for teaching social emotional skills. We have many excellent programs that have been developed over many years in Wayland. The teachers do an excellent job of sort of making SEL, social emotional learning, the heart of what they do. But as with anything, we learn that certain things work better than other things, and really sort of building a coherent experience is something that we're engaged in with that staff, and that we will continue to be over the next year as part of our work. Next year is also, we are going to continue our work about mindfulness, which is different than when kids are struggling. Mindfulness is really training them to come to class and have what they need so that they can engage. And just the expectation that every kid develop these skills of being present and ready to engage. That's training that's been done over the course of the last 2 years through grants that now the teachers have the capacity to do. It won't cost the district anything from their budget, because we've been able to use grants and train teachers to be able to do it, but it's something that's a very important part of the work we're doing. And then sort of refining our supports for students with individual needs. You'll see in the budget, for example, a request for increased counseling at LOCR. LOCR's population has gone up. We haven't increased the guidance staff there until we're proposing this year. It's critical that guidance support is there, because it's for those students that the sensory pathways and the mindfulness training and all the SEL work, there's still some kids that need additional, and we need to make sure that we're ready to provide it so we can get them back in the classroom and be successful. So those are the SEL efforts that we're proposing, and you'll see echoes of that in the budget. And here are some of those things. So just to explain a little bit, I've talked a little about the guidance staff. The .5 assistant principal at Clay Pit is part of that SEL work, because right now the principal is spending, the principal at Clay Pit, and for that matter the principals at Happy Hollow and LOCR, our two other elementary schools, are spending a significant amount of their time working with students to help them return to the classroom because they're struggling with emotions. And what's important, that principal, when they're doing that, are not providing the instructional leadership that make our schools outstanding. So we want to add to their team so that they can really play that role as instructional leader, and that's what that half-time assistant principal, moving the Clay Pit Hill School principal from half-time to full-time. Compared to other schools in the state where we have approximately 500 students at Clay Pit, to have a half-time assistant principal is extremely, extremely low allotment of administration. So we feel it is appropriate to request that. The third item, the full-time alternative learning resource team. That's a program for kids that have would otherwise might have to be in a specialized program outside the school, where we'd have to send them to sort of a private school and transport them there. This allows us, by adding a staff member, we now have 20, possibly 23 kids in this program, and we only have one staff member to work with them. This allows us to bring in another staff member, that another teacher, that can do the kinds of work that allow these kids to sort of have a milieu, a place where they can go, where their specific needs are addressed, and get the support they need so that they can leave that place and go have a regular educational experience, rather than having to go to a separate school, or rather than not being able to come to school at all. It's really been a successful model for that. You'll see, and I'm sort of combining several threads at the same time, so I hope this is not confusing, that asterisk at the bottom, you'll notice that we're going to spend $9,800 net from the budget to have a guidance counselor, 40% of a guidance counselor at LOCR. And the reason we're able to do that is that we reallocated $20,000 from their supplies and materials. Again, we felt like we had a little bit of room in LOCR, but we're pretty much scraping that dry. So Future reallocations from supplies and materials are going to be very tricky. I just wanted the heads up, but we feel comfortable with that reallocation. Elevating achievement. So we've provided this base level of support for kids so they're ready to achieve academically. Now the experience in the classroom becomes what we're focused on. And we have excellent staff and excellent teachers who we have tremendous confidence in. We have found certain supports really help them do their job well. We're emphasizing there are a couple of curricula that we've implemented at the elementary level, a new science curriculum, a new approach to reading that we're doing, and then next year a new approach to writing. Those are things that the teachers have really been excited about and have been successful. The middle school has been focused on not the delivery of, they've been focused on the delivery of instruction, but a new initiative for them is actually the feedback they're giving the students and parents with this development of standards-based report cards, where instead of an 85 or a B, a student is getting the areas specifically where they need to work, whether it's in math, whether they have to deal with factoring issues or fractions, or they know specifically what they have to work on. So it's much more informative. It does require a whole new report card, which, believe it or not, on our digital system requires about a $7,000 investment. And so that's something that the middle school is able to reallocate resources to pay for. You won't see that in our budget, but that is something that is going to cost money. They've developed at the middle school an individualized math center to really help kids with their individual needs in math. Again, they found that money by reallocating money. They found some efficiencies in their schedule to be able to find staffing to do that. You won't see that in the budget. The middle and the high school also continue to use this coaching model of using technology to break students down into smaller groups and individualize their needs. They're doing that at the middle and high school, and that is part of our budget. It's not an increase, it's been in part, but I just wanted to inform you of those things that they're doing. At the district level, the equity coordinator is someone as we look to individualize the teaching experiences, we've realized that part of what gets in our way is when students come from a different culture or background. We may not be meeting their academic needs as well as possible, so we've hired, partly through a grant and partly through asking for it in the budget, someone to focus on those kids that might be left out from a traditional curriculum. How do we make our curriculum better? How do we make our teaching better to do that? We've also, as part of our Elevating Achievement initiative, developed a Spanish Immersion program. I know Jeannie was a part of the original development of that program. We've been able to implement it, and it has been very successful. It's now moving into second grade at Locher. There's one strand of it where kids speak 90% of the day in Spanish. It's going to be part of the budget because as these kids, as we've discovered, they have needs that are like other kids' needs, but they need to be done in Spanish. So we need to hire particular staff to address that. Grade 6 at World Language. They're adding World Language to grade 6 in the middle school. This won't cost the district any money, but it's required reallocation of resources that I'll talk a little bit about. And the high school has added a graduation requirement for foreign language that, again, won't cost anything, but is a point of emphasis for us. So let's look at the budget asks related to these things. You see the Spanish Immersion teacher. This is a new group of people that need a specialized immersion teacher, and we're going to hire an interventionist. We're requesting to hire an interventionist that would focus on the math and literacy needs of those kids in that particular program, because kids fall behind, and this allows us to keep them really engaged. You see the math center is a neutral expense, as I described. The algebra and geometry request at the high school is a 20% position that will allow us, for the students that are struggling the most in math. They had a every other year course for a while to help them. This will make it every year so that they can progress more quickly. The anatomy and physiology elective, this will expand that, give kids more choices who want to take more science, And then the diversity and equity coordinator, we're asking to fold a portion of their budget, of their salary into this, and it will continue to be partly grant funded. So, and the final bucket, in addition to elevating achievement and supporting social emotional learning, is making sure that we're supporting our principals and their buildings effectively. We're asking for some increases in salary among principals to be more competitive. I was talking to an elementary principal in Concord, and her salary currently is $35,000 more than the salaries of the elementary school principals in Wayland. In Weston and Wellesley, the salaries are often $15,000 to $20,000 more. We pay our statewide. Their salaries are not terrible, but if we are competing among a group of about 10 schools that do tend to pay their principals more than we do, and we need, those are their school leaders. We need them to feel like they're being supported adequately in order to hold on to them. I'd like to take a special note about the Human Resources Administrative Assistant. That's someone who, through an audit, we learned that we needed to separate the positions of onboarding someone with their medical and their benefits and their payroll, and then the person who carries out insurance, the salaries to make sure that people are paid properly. Those need to be separate positions. We also learned that we have unique needs that can't be covered by the town because there's so many complicated steps and lanes that teachers get allocated to. They have graduate work they're constantly doing. This will allow us to do that in an effective way. We have before school and after school stipends that allow us to make the school start time work properly because buses drop off at different times because, again, we didn't increase our bus fleet. And then basic maintenance, allowing us to repair cabinetry, paint. We have been going over our maintenance budget for the last 2 years significantly. This will help us catch up with some very basic things that we need to do to make these buildings adequate. And then here you see the play out. There's a classroom computer hardware line that I didn't talk about. That will allow us to put, right now we're working with a fleet of tablets, particularly in elementary classrooms, the computer tablets that elementary kids use that were given to us by grants, given to us by the Wayland Public Schools Foundation, and they're like 8 years old. They can't handle the software that they need now. We want to replace them, but we don't want to just buy them, because what then ends up happening is then you have to buy them again, and you'd like to defray the cost of that and be able to renew them at a regular basis. So this leasing process of $100,000 will allow us to lease tablets and our AV systems, like our display boards. This is not an example of one, but display boards that are in every classroom. Right now, the high school is almost 9 years old, and their boards are failing at a large rate, and we can't keep up with their failure. So we want to put them on a sustainable lease so they get replaced on a regular basis, because those are crucial pieces of the learning experience. So this is the part, this $469,827 is what I've talked about so far. If we have a $43 million budget, that's a small part of it. It's a little bit more than 1% of it. But that's what I've talked about so far, because that's typically where there is discretion. But let's talk about the other parts. But before I do, did people have questions about what I've been talking about?
I have a lot of them.
You do. Should we wait? Maybe we should wait for the whole. Is that okay to wait for the whole thing and then? Okay. So let's talk then about the other part of the budget, which is the 99% of the budget. FY20's budget was $41,919,750. The contractual obligations, the obligations that we have towards teachers that specify they get paid as their experience increases, they move up what are called steps, as they get more graduate degrees, they move over lanes. The cost of that, of fulfilling those contractual obligations, is $550,636. And then there are enrollment-driven costs. We expect to have 43 more students in the elementary level next year, which will require 2 new sections of kindergarten. That will cost, that is a large part of that increase, that enrollment-driven increase. And so you end up with that total increasing over the budget of $694,890. So that number, plus what I just talked about, will be the number we're requesting, except for one part, except for the fact that we are negotiating a new contract with the teachers, which will have cost of living increases in it that we'll have to add to the budget, and that won't be resolved until late March, probably. So, excluding new contractual obligations, those new contracts with the teachers, the teaching assistants, the custodians, and the food service workers, we have a 2.78% increase, and we end up with that total of $43,884,467 as a request to school committee for FY21. This is a first grade classroom. So that's my presentation. But I'd love to talk about any questions people have. Go ahead.
Do you have a ballpark estimate of what you think the negotiation portion will be? You know, let's say, yes, it's going to be 3%. What would that mean in terms of that existing 41 million?
So, for every, so if it were, say, let's start with 2%. If it were 2%, you know, and the teacher salaries are 70% of the budget, say, you're going to end up with, you know, about a 1.6% increase.
Okay.
You know, I have to be really careful to throw out numbers because we're in the middle of negotiations and it's important to operate in good faith, but that would be an example of an exercise. Yes?
I think one of the criticisms I've heard over and over again about the increasing number of so-called entitlements for special needs children is that it diverts a lot of resources away from those that are maybe the average student, if there is such a thing. I'm just curious if the whole pie is education of all the children, what piece of the pie is going towards those special needs?
So we are level funding special education next year. We plan to. 21% of our kids have special education IEPs. We have invested over the last 7 years or so significantly in staffing here to hold them in the district. And initially that's a cost increase, but now it's stabilized our budget so that we're not paying for transportation or paying for them to go to a more expensive private school. We should continue to sort of see efficiencies. It's very difficult in such a small district to totally have control over that cost because 2 families can come in with a need to place a student out of district that are about $80,000 apiece. That is a huge portion of our budget. As you can see, I'm talking about for the entire budget to ask for an increase of $469,000. We could spend $160,000 over the summer on 2 children, and that's what happens. That's what the state obligation is. So you are vulnerable to it. Right now we're in a good stable place in terms of our allocations for special ed, but it is something that's sort of unavoidable, but also challenging.
So is that shouldered by local taxpayers, or is it grants and state money?
So it's mostly by grants. So there's what's called the circuit breaker, which allows you to allocate funds for out of district extreme expenses in special ed, get a percentage covered by the state that's around 70%. So you have some control over it, but you don't have complete control over it. So you try to prepare for those things, have some, some funding that enables you to respond to those things that come up. But in a small district like that, things can hit the rest of the budget as well. There's no question.
21% sounds like a high number to me. Is that typical of?
It's about average. It's a little bit higher than average, but it's not significantly higher. Particularly, we're lower than a lot of the communities around us. So, do we strive are we doing work to, I get an awkward situation. I could say to you, are we doing work to lower that number? But that's not really ethical thing to say because we respond to the kids as they need it. But there are things procedurally that we think about. Like, do we have entrance and exit criteria that are really clear and are followed really clearly and are coherent? We're examining those really closely. I think we could do more to make our exit and entry criteria clearer, and we're doing that work so that kids aren't placed in special ed unnecessarily. But we have to be careful. It would be wrong to say we're going to lower that percentage no matter what, because you need to give the kids what they need by state law. They're eligible for special ed. So that, I know it's not probably as definitive as one might like, but that's sort of where we're at.
It costs money to send kids out of district for school when we can't support them here. It's much more cost efficient to have programs if we have a group that we can, a cohort that we can do here. And so that's a lot of times what you see in our budget is that we have a very good special ed department that has worked that way. So overall, it does save the district money.
And that is that this LART, that's an example. A lot of staff, that there were students that if that program didn't exist, we would be spending about $80,000 a child to send them to a private school. Annette, yes?
Do you track for the people on IEPs how many are resident students and how many are non-resident students?
We do.
Can you give us a percentage, please?
I can't give it off the top of my head.
Can you give it to us later?
I can give you that information later.
I would appreciate it. Also, each year in October, there's an enrollment report that's filed with DESIC. I couldn't find ours this year online. Usually it's there. I was wondering, is there a reason why it's not available?
There isn't. I'm surprised to hear that. Would you like our enrollment report?
I would. Thank you. I'd like it online so
we get it.
We could all use it.
So we get it online.
Can you tell us what the percentage and what the number of out-of-district students is this year versus last year?
So we have the same number of students who are, again, I want to be careful not to get this wrong. So I think we have one fewer Boston student. Again, that number Boston resident students that are part of the MECO program, that'll vacillate between one fewer and one more in a given year because that can happen. In terms of the other category of out-of-district students is staff that are out-of-district, and that number is 81 at this point.
And that's an increase from last year.
So it is an increase from last year, yes.
When you're doing all the special education and the social emotional learning and all of that, I know that you haven't been distinguishing between the cost for resident students and non-resident. And I'm excluding METCO from that because there are students. But I'm encouraging you once again to look at your policy for staff, students who are not residents here, to perhaps limit the number that you will take overall in a year, reserve the right to release those students from our school system should you need the space for our resident students, and think carefully about what it's costing taxpayers, and let the taxpayers know clearly that you're doing this, because it does cost us in many things. I mean, I've been listening to the need for different resources in school, different buildings. Each space that we have only accommodates a certain number of students, and we build a school, we build it for the number of students. Whenever you report on things, you're really talking about our students, our resident students, and the taxpayers are supporting more than our resident students.
Yeah, I think it can be overstated, the cost of that, though. I think we need to be careful. The numbers of non-resident students that are in classrooms are not causing us to increase the number of sections. So the cost that we have foundation money that comes to us for those students that more than pays for the cost of having those students. Plus, it is a huge, huge incentive for staff to be able to send their kids to school here. So I don't see it as you do. I see it, but I understand your concern. But I don't see at this point that it is anything but a positive for us to allow students from staff who are out of district.
When you report on the cost to the residents of Wayland of providing education to the students, I would appreciate it then if you would remove from the calculation those students who are not Wayland residents, so that we get a real feel for what the actual cost of educating our students is. You've repeatedly said it doesn't cost us any more. The foundation monies are, in the past, I think it was like $1,500 per student. That truly, I don't believe, I mean, I haven't seen you figure out the calculations. I don't think that covers it, quite frankly.
So
And if you did
I don't
school
see how it.
choice, if you did school choice, you would get a full chunk of money, not just
So-
foundation money.
Right, but if it's $1,500 a child, and we don't need to go back and forth anymore, the cost that they add, because they're incremental, because the staff and the room would have to be cleaned, is maybe they have additional paper, and maybe they have additional book, and maybe they have, it's really, I would say, significantly under $1,500 a kid.
And a computer, and if they have special needs, it's adding.
It's still significantly under $1,500.
Well, it would be good if you could show us all that.
Fair enough. Okay. I'd be happy to. Please.
I have a question that may sound off the wall, but it's
That's
different
okay.
than anything else. But long ago, I grew up in Newton, and long ago, what they did at the high school was they did a lot more of the public high school in classes for adults and all that kind of thing. And at one point, they even experimented with that, with letting adults attend classes, audit classes, and that kind of thing. My thought is our educational system is a huge investment for the community.
Sure.
It means a lot to all of us. I mean, it really does. And I'm in awe of what you're doing, quite frankly. But in order to engage us more, it would be neat to find out, it could be very cost worthy.
Yes.
To try to open the school either at night or the library that's closed a great deal of the time. I think there are things that could be done to engage the whole community. I don't know that other towns are doing this. It seems to go in and out of phases. I can remember when my son was young, he went through the Wayland schools, now my grandchildren are. But I can remember taking art classes and different things in high school, and even just being in the building, even walking around the building. I mean, you get a sense of,
Yeah.
Oh, this is where my tax money's going, Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's a very interesting idea. Yes.
I think that's brilliant. Other towns have different programs. I go to Lexington, I go to Concord, to adult education
Yes.
in the schools.
Yes.
And I pay to go to adult education in the schools.
Yeah.
And I think that Wayland could do a lot more thinking outside the traditional structure and welcome people. Now, this isn't to say, you're not saying if there are 25 chairs and you're the 26th person, that you would take a high schooler seat. You're saying if there's room.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes immediately people put up barriers, but I would like to encourage an invitation to consider that structure. Another structure that occurs to me, you said there are issues around principal pay, and I saw your diagram with a little bit of horror that you were looking at adding a half of an assistant principal for $55,000, whereas you were hiring a whole ALT teacher for $42,000.
So let me explain why that is there. So that's up there. So we are reallocating one teaching assistant from the budget of the high school. It's a net $42,816. So you can add $25,000 to that salary because
That's correct.
$25,000 is being reduced from another staff member that would be supporting those children.
Because to walk the talk, you want that person to have potentially a master's degree
Of course.
in counseling and psychology or social work, so he or she can apply the alternative treatment that a child might need.
Of course.
The other thing that occurs to me that's again outside the box is to have a menu plan. We always welcomed those people, Annette, who came from out of district with their parents who served our children. However, I hear what you're saying, and I think an easier route might be, those kids bring a per capita sum, right? So if a kid comes from Hudson, the kid brings
No, they don't.
the money.
No, they don't. No, because it's not school choice.
No, they just bring the foundation budget equivalent, which is $1,500.
If it was school
Okay,
choice, they bring.
that's
it.
a separate issue then, Annette, you can get on that. But the second thing is to look at menu options. So think of the equivalent amount of what a high school education would cost. And then say, here's a perk. You can choose this perk, or you can choose graduate education credits, or you can choose going to a conference. So there is a sense of it's like a development fund.
Yeah,
You
no,
can opt out, and if there's a cap, and this feeds into Annette, if there's a cap, then they might pay $3,000 more in order for their child to go to high school here, or $1,500 more, or whatever. But I mean, I think there are some creative budget and planning ventures that can happen to keep the budget within containment.
I think it really depends on what total percentage of the budget is, because I think Arthur made a good point. In terms of recruitment and retaining people, you've got to be aware of what other schools in the district are paying. And if this is a significant incentive in being able to hire and keep the teachers that we want, it's all part of the picture. So it's like all these things, it's more complicated. You know, this overview that we've got is very simplified.
Yeah.
And there's so much hidden behind it. I appreciate that. But
No, and we'll go into negotiations. Certainly that's a huge benefit that we provide for the staff that are out of district, there's no question.
are you able to put a value on that, that you can use in your negotiations with future teachers?
I suppose, yeah.
I mean,
You can put a value.
I think you ought to
on it.
think of it like that, because it is a value and we're paying
It's
for it.
value, there is a number you can put on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a number you can put on tuition, and some schools have created a max, so that it used to be like 3 credits or 6 credits, and you could go to Harvard or Framingham State. Now it's maybe $2,000 a year. I mean, you want to keep educating your populace, the teachers of the
Yep.
to keep it going, but at the same time, we have finite resources. And I think people will appreciate that. And also, it's a privilege to be here.
Yeah, fair enough.
And to continue to say that, it's a privilege. We're privileged to have you, you're privileged to be here, we're all privileged together. But there's a cost for privilege.
Okay.
The numbers that are up there are salary only, they don't include benefits.
No, I understand.
No, I just want to state this, and the benefits are significant. I know that I've looked at them in other departments, and I haven't looked at them specifically for the schools because it's tough to do. But for the police, for example, it's like if the salary is $100,000, 50%, $50,000 is the benefits cost. So that benefits cost is in the town budget, it's not in the school budget. So every time we add an FTE, we're adding at least 50% more of their salary.
Annette, would that include the three things that I mentioned?
No,
Where are they?
I assume in the school budget.
I'm sorry, I'm lost. What is she
For
doing?
example, Annette's point about the students coming in from out of district. I asked about, for example, college tuition, graduate school tuition. Where would that be?
So we set aside a certain amount of money every year in for reimbursement of graduate school. Course reimbursement, it's called.
Yeah, how much is that?
I think it's $160,000.
And how is that allocated?
It's allocated, I think, by application on a first come, first served basis.
Okay, there's a way to rethink that right away. Make it competitive. Have people do grants.
So
Yeah.
it's part of, all those things are a part of that contractual negotiation. So that's set up through the contract. And the question is you make that decision, is that an advantage, or do we then spend more money on salary, the cost of living increase, the negotiation? So, we'll definitely bring all these things to the table as we negotiate.
Just one more point about that.
Yep.
In the contractual negotiations, if people squawk about that, you can say, how about if we have a dual committee of elected faculty and administration who will make the determinations about how the allocations will be made. We'll make determinations about if there's a ceiling, if it's $1,000 a person or whatever. As long as people feel included in conversations, and I would preface it with, we really don't want to leave this behind, we want to keep this going because we value an educated workforce. Then, when you enter with that premise and you enter with inclusivity, you have an audience that then gains appreciation. It's an interesting psychological twist.
Okay. No, that's really worth thinking about, and I appreciate that.
How much do you allocate or put aside for the before and after school stipends?
So that next year will cost about $27,000.
And who is eligible for those?
Typically, anyone is eligible, but typically the people that we hire are teaching assistants that are already on staff and already coming to the building.
Yeah, who is eligible to use that service, that stipend?
Our students.
All of our students.
Yeah, so the reason that we provide that as opposed to a fee-based process is that we are picking students up earlier at the elementary level than the day starts. So they're arriving, many of them are arriving 15 minutes early, so we give them a supervised recreational period because they have to be picked up earlier to provide enough time to take that same bus and go, once they're dropped off, go to the middle and the high schools so that we don't have to add buses to that fleet.
So is this going to be a permanent thing that we're going to be doing? I thought it was a 1 year off.
It could be permanent. We're trying to, streamline the bus situation so that we can limit the number of kids that have this experience. It was last, I would say that in October we had 300 students at Clay Pit that were arriving at 7:30, and now we have about 100.
And school
Because-
starts at 7:45.
So we have been able to, through a lot of work and through learning traffic patterns these last few months, we've been able to redesign the traffic to reduce the number of staff that we would need in the future. But I would suspect that it's not going to resolve itself completely. Initially, I think that we thought the cost was about $45,000 at the beginning of in the fall, and we've reduced it to $27,000 based on efficiencies we found.
At Clayford Hill School, there are storage facilities outside. There's a very large trailer, the size of a tractor trailer, that's been there for years. and is weathered and has a note on it of who we're leasing it from.
Mhm.
Is that something we own, or are we still leasing it, and has anybody looked at the cost benefit of leasing versus purchasing or getting rid of?
We have definitely looked into sort of the future of that particular item. I can get you an update on sort of where we are with that.
What's in it?
It's it's a combination of things like furniture that we cycle through, and sometimes we have we have more students that come in, and sometimes we have less. So we need to have furniture available for them so that we don't have to purchase new furniture. We need a place to put it. It is materials that we're thinking might be useful, but we're not going to use immediately. It's a variety of things. We don't have, the problem in these schools is they are not set up to store materials like elementary schools should. We're actually, looking for more storage possibilities there.
I guess when I was on the Board of Road Commissioners, we learned that one of the trailers at the transfer station we had been leasing. We had no idea we were leasing it. It was costing us a ridiculous amount of money, and so we got rid of it. And then we actually purchased something that we could use. So I'm hoping that you are looking really carefully at what the annual cost is versus even keep storing anything, or whether you should buy something.
Sure. Yes.
Getting back to the previous point, when my kids were in the Wayland schools, we had a lab. It was called the Lab, and then it moved, I believe, to Lexington. And it was a place where neighboring towns could partner, and where kids from those towns were bused. It was actually in the corner of the high school,
Yeah.
and it was awesome. We had quite a few kids from Wayland, kids from my kids' grades were in it, and that meant they could interact with the kids from those grades when they weren't in the lab. And it was a really wonderful model. So and Wayland then saved money, and they didn't have the transportation expenses that other towns had. So in thinking, unless the laws change, Wayland incurs money to transport to other places in addition to paying tuition. Is there any thought to regroup and find space, wherever that is, and reconstruct the lab, or a different kind of a lab, and say, hey, Sudbury, hey,
So-
Natick?
So we are building those programs. ALRT is an example. Another example are sort of specialized programs that are at Clay Pit. What you're asking in addition is to sort of expand them.
It's more severe and profound
Yeah,
grouping,
we've grown them.
Sudbury has an AL.
We've grown them. We are dealing with space considerations. We are pretty maxed out in space in the district, so we want to be careful about sort of growing these programs too fast. We are growing sort of our specialized programs at Clay Pit to meet the needs of our students here.
Mhm.
So that hasn't been part of our thinking of sort of expanding them that quickly to sort of become what you call sort of a network program. But it's certainly, I mean, as we figure, as the demographics play out over the next 10 years, certainly worth considering.
Yeah, these were for primarily kids with intellectual limitations and severe cases of things like cerebral palsy.
Yep.
So it was less for the ADHD or, mild emotional kinds of things.
Sure.
And that's a separate behavioral classroom.
Yep.
Thank you for saying that you're looking into those.
No problem.
That can be a major saving of money.
Yes. Go ahead.
You had mentioned that this coming year you're anticipating 43 more kids joining more in the elementary.
The elementary level, yeah.
Nothing in the sort of junior high
So
school?
we will have a overall.
And I was also going to ask, do you have sort of a at least planning a view of what you think is gonna happen in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah.
I'm just
So
curious.
we just did a demographic study that
Okay.
takes us to 2030.
Okay.
So, and we see a population increase over the next 3 years in the lower Quaker Hill area, and everyone else sort of being, and the middle school will, in 3 years from now, the middle school will have an increase, but then go back down.
Yep.
The high school as well. So there's a current bubble of kids in the second grade, and that'll play out. But there's an actual demographic increase that'll take place in over the next 3 years among the early elementary kids.
And that'll ripple through.
Yeah, it'll ripple through. We will probably have ultimately sort of about 100 more kids that'll join the district over the next 10 years. That is actually unusual for districts across the state. Most districts across the state are going down. So it was important to know that and to plan for it. It's in the, which is online, this budget book, under my, I think under the superintendent's reports, but it has at the back of it the demographic study that you can look at. Thank you.
And you mentioned that's online?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Annette, go ahead.
Okay, how does the demographic study play into the accepting of non-resident students?
So we are very careful to, we will increase the capacity of school based on, we don't expect that we would need to add sections, additional sections because of non-resident students. We accept them with the anticipation that they're, with using these projections to ensure that there is room in the existing section.
So if there were a new teacher who came and had a student that that person would like to add to our school system, if you saw that your demographics wouldn't allow it, you would say, no, you can't.
I didn't say that.
That's what I'm asking.
And contractually, we haven't done that in the past. I don't know, we haven't faced that issue. And I guess I want to say publicly that we just have to be very careful about making sure that we don't cause that kind of expense for the district, but I can't guarantee that that student would be excluded. And you're asking for that student to be excluded. I totally understand that now.
Yeah,
And
no,
I'm not
I'm
prepared to
what
tell
I'm
you,
asking
and I'm not
for-
prepared to tell you that I would.
What I'm asking for is a real policy.
I know.
So that it controls what our spending is and what the class sizes are.
I understand.
On the Spanish immersion program, is that open to any and every student in the Wayland school system?
It is. It's a lot. So we have more students that want to be in it than we have room, so we do a lottery.
So when you, and put in that lottery could be a new teacher's student.
It's possible.
And what
Yeah.
is the number of FTE increases from this current, from the budgeted FY 2019-2020 school year to the next school year?
5.
From the budgeted amount?
I'm just not sure what you mean from the budget.
Well, when you came into the budget this last year,
Yeah.
you said there's going to be an increase of X. And sometimes during the year, we wind up with more increase. So I'm just wondering from that budget.
So from right now, right now?
From the last, from when
Okay.
you came in
Last
for the
budget.
last budget.
The budget
Yeah.
we're in right now, did we
But
stick
from
to
the-
what we said?
Right, and so I need to get back to you on that.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Jeannie, do you mind just writing down that question? And you wrote down the question about special ed. And I've got to be careful, your special ed question about percentage of non-resident students, I just got to be careful about confidentiality. So
Right, I don't
I just
wanna
want
do
to,
anything-
I just want to be careful before I overpromise there, but I will get back to you about what we can offer in terms of statistics. Yes?
I'm thinking about expanding this. Partnerships. What can you do with cross-district partnerships? We used to have them with Needham, with internships or fellowships or whatever. They were tuition-oriented. Have you considered the International Baccalaureate program? And what would that involve in terms of parental contribution? I wrote down your grants, I was really happy to see those. And I think that whoever is in the district who's looking for those will probably find others. Brown University right now is hot to trot on partnerships. So I think they're with mindfulness. So I think there might be some other places in addition to McLean that might be interested.
Right, and we have a partnership with the state that's provided all the funding for many
Yeah,
of
that's
the
awesome.
initiatives. So, yeah, we're working with the state to recruit a more diverse working force. They've given us grant money for that. We are eager to develop those partnerships, absolutely.
And your bilingualism is awesome. We're late at that. And hopefully it'll go beyond Spanish, but that's a great start.
Yep.
And then the last thing, for now anyway, is what about renting out the auditorium? What about renting out the fields? What about thinking about how we can get money rather than constrain money?
So we do that.
And how much do you make a year?
And I actually have a meeting today, to talk where they're gonna give me the final accounting for so far, what we are making and what we plan to make for the, because I can't answer the question.
That's a really important variable in this presentation.
Yeah, and I think I wanna be careful about, sort of our ability to maximize revenue also comes at a cost, right? And
We have to
comes.
build it in.
Yeah, I mean, we want to protect the assets that we have, and we want to make sure, but absolutely, I mean, we definitely look for those kinds of agreements and so forth.
And family literacy is a hot topic. So in this, your recommendation about opening the school to other people in the community, that would be another excellent example of how you can keep the doors open for tuition paying, very low tuition paying, like $10, $20. I pay $20 to take a course in Lexington, for example. And I love it, absolutely love it. I go at night, there's a group of people from across different towns who also don't have it.
So I live in Lexington, and taxpayers support that course, which I don't think is exactly what
Well, I'm not talking language,
but they
I think investment.
No, but they subsidize that $10, $20 cost. And I'm not saying that I'm against it, but I think that the town is very careful about those kinds of investments, because it does require a fiscal expense that's significant in Lexington. So I just wanted, all these things of sort of opening up the school require administrative overhead, require organizational support that we just have to be careful about, because it incurs a cost, and I think that the larger picture which you get at is sort of involving the community and giving them access. I think as a money earner, I just want to be careful about how much we can make out of it, but in terms of making it a place where people really sort of appreciate the assets, appreciate the experience, you're absolutely right. There's definitely some opportunity there.
Well, that's your money earning also.
Absolutely, no question,
Yeah.
no question. Yes.
Slightly off topic, but I remember from the town meetings last year that there was some consternation about the possibility of the bus parking location
Yes.
changing, and I figured that because that affects both the school budget and the town budget, are you anticipating, are you able to say anything about that?
Right, so we have, we are working with the state and with different private funders to develop a solution that'll be lasting. We have sort of an agreement to go forward at very, very minimal costs for the next year or two, but we have to find a long-term solution still. Wayland's credit to it, with strong citizen involvement, does not want those buses anywhere in close to any residential area, so that limits our opportunities. But we do feel like we've identified some places and working with the state that they'll allow us, in a partnership with a private individual, that'll allow us to store things over a long period of time. I'm confident that'll work out at a low cost. And so far, we're so good with that.
Excellent.
So, I should probably close up because we've been here for over an hour and I'm leaving someone waiting upstairs. But I'd be happy. We are again at Loker
Tomorrow night at 7.
tomorrow night at 7, which you're welcome to do. I have some follow-up for everyone, and you are always welcome to email me or call me to talk further about it. I'd be happy to do that in person with anyone.
What do you need from us? Did you come with questions for us?
I didn't come with questions for you, but so I need your involvement. I mean, I think we need to figure out how to. I do think that what we presented today are absolutely crucial for our kids to have the experience that we all in Wayland want them to have. We're not there are a lot of things that we did not put in this budget that we feel that weren't frivolous, but we just felt were not as important as these things. There's things like full day kindergarten where we charge a fee for students to come to kindergarten. There are things like a lot of the counseling at the middle school. Oh my goodness. That's bizarre. There's funding at the high school and the middle school for social working that we did not put in the budget. There are staffing allocations at the middle school that we did not put in the budget. There are many things. But we believe these are the critical things for us to provide an outstanding experience, and we need you to ask your questions, get them answered, and hopefully really support the budget. So, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.